Hello everybody, Jose Rodriguez here. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone, by the way. It is already past, of course. But anyway, if I did not say so, happy Thanksgiving to everyone who celebrates out there. When I was thinking about putting something together for this video, I was trying to come up with a catchy name or something like that, a title of some sort. Basically, it's just going to be about things you should not do when you choose to refill your Canon printers, specifically those, and also some of the Epson printers that are still available for us to refill. There's not that many, and all of the new ones that are coming out are very likely going to be locked against any such thing as refilling. To put it simply, there may be situations where some of these newer printers, especially not the very sophisticated ones, the Expression series, more home type oriented printers, they will probably be downgradable, if you will, to the so-called chipless firmware. But that's a totally different subject, and one that will allow you to then use whatever refillable cartridges they come up with without having to worry about chip resetting or any such thing. But with Canon printers, especially the Pro 100, which is our favorite printer, you can get it for so little after rebate. Probably the most popular printer in the world at this time. People still go out and look on eBay for cheap refillable cartridges or compatible cartridges even. I think they're used to being able to do that with Epson printers. And it's not so much of a danger with Epson printers because of the different style of printhead. You simply will not harm that printhead on the Epson printers if your cartridges don't deliver ink with the same efficiency as the OEM cartridges did. If you were ever to dissect a modern OEM cartridge for Epson and then do the same thing with a compatible cartridge for Epson, that same exact model, for instance, you will be shocked. The Epson is extremely intricate, and the compatible one is just a space holding ink. You don't even know how that can possibly work. And often that's the case. It just doesn't really work that well. All right. So I think the popularity of jumping over to one of these types of cheap systems is just the price. It's just too tempting. But try to stay away from those. Do not ever consider them. You need to use your original cartridges. Oh, but why should I do that? I mean, what's the difference? They're charging me a fortune. Well, if I run these cartridges till they are relatively empty, I could sell them. I could sell them for several dollars each. You know why? Because the cartridge itself is very valuable. It's got such an immense amount of engineering built into it that it makes it actually a good commodity to have. Hello, look at this. And I got bags over there as well with other Canon cartridges. These will be flushed and these will be modified. And I will use them on my printer. I'm not going to be selling these. These are not for sale. That is not what I do. Anyway, but that's the way to go. You need to use your original CLI 42 cartridges if we're going to talk about the Pro 100, or the PGI 72 cartridges if we're going to talk about the Pro 10, and so forth. Then we get into Epson refillables. Okay, they work very well with Epson. Again, they do not provide the perfect, almost perfect ink flow, but it's good enough. And because of the printhead being such a robust piece of technology, it doesn't really harm it. Okay, whereas a thermal printhead on a Canon printer requires that you provide it with the most reliable, full ink flow, as close to OEM as possible. Now, after all that talking, let's go ahead and discuss something pertaining to the OEM cartridges. So here I have a CLI 42. I have it clipped. Notice there is no plug on top. You know why? This is still OEM. I used this just once to print those test prints when I was testing the performance of the PC42 SE inks. You want to see something odd? Okay, I'm going to show you something odd. So this is an OEM one, again, not modified yet. It was just simply used till empty. You see something? What is it that you see? Please tell me. This one has been used. Probably, maybe. I use 5% of the ink. Look at the top of the sponge. Okay, you see that? It's still white. When it was factory filled, because it is done using a special vacuum process, the top of the sponge never has ink. And you can see the separation mark between the upper sponge and the lower sponge. You see that very clearly here as well. The upper part of the sponge never was saturated. Once you sever the system, if you will, let's just call it that. Once you go ahead and cut a hole, whether you drill it on the side or you actually remove the ball, once you refill such a cartridge, the sponge will saturate all the way up. Now, you would think that would be a great thing, right? Oh yes, my sponge is totally saturated. Apparently not, because apparently this actually maintains some kind of special pressure. I don't even know how to explain it. Okay? Because you never severed that space. In other words, you did not create a hole. Whereas on this one, yeah, you did. Okay? They actually fill it by vacuum before they insert that ball. Okay? It's really an intricate process. So the sponge never gets saturated to the top. What does that do? Well, it prevents any ink from ever entering that very delicate serpentine vent. The serpentine vent is located on top. Remember the little tab you have to remove when you install those cartridges initially? That opens up the end of the serpentine vent, and you cannot at all interfere with that flow of air. Okay? It's very, very intricate. I know. It seems simple. Oh, Jose, you're BSing me. No, I'm not. That is very intricate system right there. You don't want to mess around with that. So the minute that we sever the cartridge, and by severing I mean we now have an opening into the liquid chamber. Now I put a clip on the bottom, I add ink, it fills it all the way to the top. If I overfill it, I will get ink into my serpentine vent. You don't want to do that. The only way to solve that would be to literally blow the ink out. You might get it all over your mouth and teeth, but that would be the only way to do that. The OEM cartridges never, ever, ever suffer from that because the upper portion of the sponge never becomes saturated. Once you invade, if you will, that cartridge, by modifying it, then you run into the danger of getting ink up there because now there's no control. This can fill itself all the way to the top and more and beyond. Okay? Whereas before it was impossible. Okay? So that's why OEM, and I'm not saying, oh, forget third party, only use OEM from now on. But that is why OEM cartridges work the best. And once we get in there and start tinkering, we reduce the reliability of the cartridges. Now, unfortunately, I know I should have bought some of those just to show you guys. I do not have an equivalent CLI 42 copy, so-called compatible cartridge or so-called refillable cartridge to show you. But let me give you a little tour around the internal architecture of this cartridge. Too bad I don't have a backlight because then you would see it clearly. But simply put, two compartments divided by a wall. The wall has an opening on the bottom, an orifice. The liquid chamber has a prism that performs a very important function. Above the sponge compartment is another separator, okay? And it has a serpentine vent. There are little vertical separating structures here. Those do not exist in your compatible cartridges, okay? They are simply not there. The sponge, dual density, two-part sponge. That means that it provides the correct ink flow, okay? That's how it can adjust and fluctuate the ink flow. Ink that is coming from the liquid chamber immediately enters through the bottom of the sponge, maintains that lower portion of the sponge at the correct, fully saturated state, okay? Your compatible cartridges, no. The whole sponge is got the same so-called flow index, if you will. You may end up overfeeding ink. You may end up leaking ink, whereas, for instance, the cartridge is standing still. You're not using the printer, and yet ink is leaking out. There's no way that it can control that. It just can't. Okay? They don't have that fancy serpentine vent either. So, what's the point of all this? Well, Jose, I can get those for $5. Sure, of course you can. And they're worth about 50 cents in my book, because the harm that they will cause eventually, maybe not at first, but eventually down the road, is just really not something you want to take a chance with. Okay? They will eventually fail on you. These will never fail on you. They just don't. Keep refilling them properly, and they will never fail on you. Now, some people may say, well, what about agitation and all that? Well, no, this is dye ink. You don't need to agitate anything. What to do now when you choose to finally sever the cartridge and begin to use it for refilling? Make sure, this is the most important part. Now, this one here was never meant to be refilled by the user. That's why he gave it to me in such a condition. The chamber is empty, and he probably used, you can see that the bottom portion of the sponge has air in it. So he went probably to the empty so-called declaration by the chip. Yeah, it has to declare it empty when there's still some ink in the sponge. Otherwise, you will burn out the printhead, okay? You need ink to keep that printhead cool. Now, here's the exit port. There's a lot to explain here, so bear with me. This is the exit port. Notice there's more air near the exit portion of the sponge. And then this area here is more saturated. Okay. Again, this has been sitting upside down, right side up, sideways forever in my bag over here. So the hardest thing during the refilling process, after I go ahead and remove the ball and I drill out the hole to 5/32 of an inch diameter so that I can then use a plug to seal it, and I fill that with ink, the ink may not flow sufficiently to displace the existing air already in the sponge or fibers in there. It can't push it out. Air is just too tenacious. It just cannot push it out. So how to prevent this from happening? Because this might cause a problem with your ink flow. You don't want air near your exit port. You want nothing but ink, solid ink, okay? By that I mean no air. So how do you prevent this? Well, if you're just going to use OEM constantly, don't worry about it. Let someone else worry about that. So now I come in and I take that cartridge, I drill it, I prep it, I flush it, dry it. Now, that process has removed every ounce of moisture out of that sponge. The moisture, the ink itself, is also causing blockages. Okay, it just cannot push those little pockets of air. But when there's nothing but air in that sponge, the ink can easily enter and saturate the bottom of the sponge. And you want to fill it until it is about that far off the top, not all the way up. And by that is controlled by you blocking the serpentine vent as you are allowing the ink to flow. Add some ink, put a plug on it. Block that vent with your finger, okay? And then just watch it flow in. This will drop a lot as it's being saturated into the sponge. Remove the plug. Do not take your finger off of here yet. Add more ink. Do not go beyond about 1/8 of an inch from the top. That's it. Allow this to completely saturate the sponge. It's going to saturate it to the very top. That's what's going to happen because it has been invaded by you. You actually opened up that liquid chamber. So now keep your finger still on that vent. Let it saturate and plug it. If it's still to the top, remove some of the ink. You want to plug it when the ink is about 1/8 inch from the top. Now you can remove your finger, okay, once you have plugged this side. And again, you don't do this properly, then you're going to have many different levels, if you will, of efficiency in ink flow. You don't want that. You want constant, efficient ink flow. So when you make that choice to refill, think about all of the problems you're going to create, introduce, maybe not take care of properly by not refilling the cartridges properly. Now, you've been successful. You have filled it. It is all the way to the top. None of the ink has entered the serpentine vent. Your liquid chamber is about 1/8 inch from the top. You're ready to begin to print. Make sure that it's already been reset, okay, right here, and insert it into your printer. Proceed with a nozzle check after it does its purge cycle, which is going to do it anyway. Proceed with a nozzle check. Make sure that you do have a complete 100% nozzle check for that particular color. Yellow cartridges, they must be flushed. This cartridge must be flushed before I use any other type of third-party ink on it, by the way. In case I didn't mention that, okay? Yellow needs to be reflushed completely, okay? Keep that in mind. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention, should have said that. Too many things in my mind. Sorry about that. You hold a cartridge like this. Remove the clip. Remove your finger from the vent, okay? Remove the plug and just watch it drip. It should be about 2 drips per second. Once you establish that it is constantly dripping 2 drips per second, put the clip back on it on the bottom, top off the necessary amount to bring it up to the proper level, about 1/8 of an inch from the top, and put the plug. What that did was establish that you actually have good ink flow. And that's what you want. You want the best ink flow. Ink flow that matches the original untampered cartridge. Okay, once you tamper it, it's not going to be original. It's not going to be exactly the same. But you want to have sufficient ink flow. Am I scaring you enough? Yes, I hope so. Now you can go ahead and pop it into the printer and print. Run your nozzle check after your purge cycle is completed to ensure that it is indeed printing 100%. Print one of your images. Make sure that there's no banding or any kind of other problems with color rendition. And that's about it. Okay. Just remember that those compatible cartridges, their sponges are horrible. They don't have the technology physically built into these cartridges. They do not have that prism. By the way, the prism is what creates that low warning. Once there's no ink, the beam of light that is constantly being shown through the prism gets deflected at a different angle, and that triggers the low warning. So the prism is very important. They don't want to include a prism on those cheap cartridges, okay? It's not there. It uses some other method to guess when you are low. Oh boy, yeah. Now, if I haven't scared you enough about the Pro 100 and refilling, let's continue over to another printer, one that is not so finicky, the Pro 10. Now, with this one, the difference, big difference, you can still refill both. Pro 100, refill your cartridge when or before you get the low warning. So keep an eye on your ink levels, okay? Keep an eye on your ink levels. When they reach relatively low, not yet triggering that low warning, reset and refill that cartridge, okay? Why should you be so anxious to perform that refill? Because you don't want to ever lose any ink on this chamber. You want to continually be replenishing the sponge. So you want to catch it before you run out of ink, okay? What happens when you don't have any ink here? What's left besides, once the ink is gone? Air. And the air will get into that just like it did, where's my other cartridge? Just like it did here. This has to be flushed, not just because it's yellow. If it was any other color, I would have to flush it as well, okay? So this has to be flushed because there's air in the sponge. So by refilling your cartridges when it reaches low, this sponge is still fully saturated. Without what? Without air. Nothing has to be pushed out. Nothing has to be forced out, okay? All you're doing is topping off your gas tank. You don't want to let your gas tank go dry, right? You don't want to do that until your engine stops running. There's a lot of lines beyond the gas tank all the way to your fuel injectors, right? So you don't want to do that. You want to fill this up when it is low, if you can catch it exactly at the low point or before that. That way this sponge, and this is the take-home message. You want to continually refill these cartridges and be successful at it, okay? And you want success. Never wait beyond low. I just got into a discussion with someone. Oh, I can still get 7 prints. Oh, you idiot. Why? Why are you doing that? No. Fill it before it is low. What does that cost you? What? You can still print those 7 prints right after that, Why do you must squeeze out another 7 prints after the low warning? Don't do that. Let it go low or before low. Top it off. Done. Whew. What is so difficult about that, right? I mean, yeah, really. All right. Pro 10 cartridges. They have these also compatible. And they're junk. Pure junk. Don't get them. If you open one of these up, you'll be amazed at the internal technology, just like these. Okay? There is an accordion bag inside. It has a pressure sensitive metallic diaphragm. It's like a little piston type device. It keeps that at the correct pressure as ink is being delivered into your printhead. Okay? Easy as pie to refill. And these, get ready, can be run until they're empty. As soon as they're empty, fill them by just dribbling ink right on the exit sponge right here. I call this a sponge because it is, but there's an ink bag inside. There is no internal sponge. It's a bag full of ink, and the bag is like an accordion. So it will collapse with the help of that spring as it is providing ink to your printhead. That technology does not exist in the compatible cartridges or refillable cartridges for the Pro 10. Don't get them. Don't get them. If you value the life or if you love your printer, do not go to the dark side and get any of that junk. Use your original cartridges. Buy the refill kit from whomever. I don't care who you buy it from. Okay? The red setter USB resetter is what you want to use on these cartridges. Flash, continuous red, and then it goes out. You're done. The cartridge now is reset. Drip, 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 drip until the cartridge on top of a scale that was already zeroed out before you put the cartridge on it until it reaches 32 grams. Okay? Some people can go to 33. 32 is more than plenty. Okay? So 32 grams, give it a little squeeze. You will see the flood of ink being produced on the sponge. Let go, and it will be reabsorbed back in. Put the clip on it. Put it aside until you need it. Say you have 2 sets. That's even better. I have lots of sets. So that makes me lucky, I guess. Yeah. So that's it. Remove it when it's empty or near empty. You don't have to wait till empty. Near empty. Reset it. Dribble, dribble, dribble until it reaches 32 grams. Clip. Done. Store them this way. So that sponge is constantly wet. Okay? Now, let's talk about Epson. Epson's very forgiving because of the technology of their printheads. It does not utilize a thermal system. You don't provide enough ink flow, you will overheat that channel and it will eventually fail on you. Solution, a new printhead, new set of cartridges that are providing the correct level of ink flow. Okay, so why do that, right? You want to make sure you do things right. Epson, 3880, 3800, P800. They use these types of cartridges. Okay, these are very well designed. They work really well. They do not have an internal ink bag. They are not quite as efficient as a real, honest to goodness OEM cartridge. But the good news is that you can modify the original OEM cartridges for refilling. You may or may not want to do that. Okay, if you have a P800 with the chipless solution firmware installed, then go ahead and modify your original cartridges because they will serve you a little bit more efficiently than these here. these will work just as well. This is what I have currently on my P800. I'm running a different system. I have a chip decoder board, so it's working as OEM. It's showing me ink levels. The chipless solution will never show you ink levels. It'll always be full. So you need to keep it topped off at all times. Now, for the R3000 or the P600, this is the type of cartridge you will be using. Again, another refillable cart. Why? There's no way to modify the OEM. There is no way. These are pretty reliable as well. I'm running a set of them right now on my R3000. The shape is identical. The only thing they have changed for the P600 is the chip. On a P400, then you will be using these types of refillables, okay? Again, this will work on the R2000, and they're the same exact size and design for the P400, only the chip is different. So there you go. These cartridges require you that the first time you fill them, you prime them. And what is priming? I don't know if you can see a round chamber here. That chamber will not have ink when you first initially refill the cartridge. So it has to be primed. Here there's a plug. You remove this plug, attach a syringe to it, and suck back. That will suck ink from the internal compartment in and up and around the corner and this way and that way into that chamber. Yeah, it is kind of a little bit of a maze. You fill that chamber up, that means that now ink is able to reach the exit port. That's what you want to achieve. With the P600, the same thing. You will see a slide chamber here. Initially, when you refill these, you're going to use the vacuum method. Okay, I demonstrate that on video. I have that on video. Simply put, you're going to load a larger syringe than necessary. This holds about 26 ml of fluid. So you want something, for instance, like a 40, 50, 60 ml syringe. You're going to load the amount that you need, and you're going to insert with a needle first. Fill it about 3/4 of the way up. Remove the needle. Insert the plain tip right into the fill hole and suck back. You still have the film not severed yet here, and you still have the vent plug installed. Suck back, create a vacuum. When you let go of the plunger, ink will be allowed to come in, and guess what? Magically, ink will enter the priming chamber. That's how you do the vacuum fill. Look it up on YouTube. There's many other videos, not just mine, on that process. The same thing applies to this, although this is more of an auto priming type cartridge. You see this arc right here? That is the priming area, this chamber. There's a micro screen for filtering any kind of pigment particles that may be larger than necessary. They're there because they know what third-party quality is like. So again, these can just be filled. They'll self-prime themselves. You will know that's a self-priming cartridge if you see that little arc on the bottom here by the exit port. If it has a circular port up here or chamber, then that has to be vacuum filled. Now here's the thing. Here's the trick. So you think, oh, I'm done. That's it. I can just print now till the cows come home for pennies, right? Of course you can. But here's the problem. We're using OEM chips over here, okay? These are very accurate. Canon printers, the ink flow technology is very accurate. It can actually measure almost, especially printers like these. It can actually measure the volume of ink passing through, whereas lesser or level, I should say, printers tend to sort of guess. They are using a guesstimation, if you will. Guesstimate, yeah, that's it. And so your reporting of ink levels is not going to be as accurate as that from this type of printer. But nevertheless, the OEM chips are very accurate. Once you switch over to a refillable cartridge or one of those compatible cartridges, not only do you have less ink than the OEM cartridges have, but the chips do not report the correct ink level. They will report that you have more ink than you actually have in your cartridge. That is about as dangerous as you can think. The last thing you want is to actually run out of ink with a Canon cartridge. Overheating, remember that word, overheating. Epson, well, it won't overheat, it won't cause any harm, but believe me, you don't want to get air. You don't want to use up all the ink just because your chip still says hey, mister, you still have plenty of ink. Don't worry. That's how inaccurate they are. Yeah. So you will end up not only draining the cartridge, but draining the priming chamber and introducing air in your ink lines on a printer such as a P800 or earlier. Oh, good Lord, that would cause me to lose sleep. Yeah, because then I got to run a complete ink initialization and waste a ton of ink. I don't want to do that to push that air out. Cleaning cycles won't do it. Okay, so what do you have to do with these cartridges? All of these right here. Don't ever let them go empty physically. Okay, these with auto reset chips will not reset until they actually are declared empty. But you cannot take a chance that your declaration of empty by the chip physically equals the amount of ink left in the cartridge. No, the discrepancy is huge. So don't ever let these cartridges get empty. The minute you see physically with your eyeballs that they're about halfway down, top them off. Don't worry about what the chip says. Top them off. When the chip finally says, hey, I'm empty, you still have lots of ink in the cartridge, and you never let that priming chamber become empty. It's going to be extremely difficult for you to reprime that chamber once you have installed those cartridges. You got to seal every single opening. You got to seal the vent. Of course, you got a plug. You can do that, but you then got to seal this with some kind of rubber compound. Your finger, I would not recommend you do that. Okay, because you need to be able to create a vacuum again. Yeah, it's not easy to do. You can do it, but why would you want to do this every single time? So top them off as soon as they reach about half full. And that will prevent you from ever suffering from a printer cartridge that has lost its prime and is no longer able to deliver ink. The ink cannot go uphill. So you need that siphon effect. That's what you're creating, a siphon effect, just like when you're taking gas out of your tank to fill your lawnmower. You create a siphon. That's what those chambers do. Okay, ink cannot go uphill. It's impossible. All right. Whew. That was way too long, wasn't it? But I hope you guys enjoy this. And again, I'm not trying to scare the living, you know what, out of everybody when it comes to making that choice or step. You just got your Pro 100, your Pro 10, your Pro 1000, and you realize what you've gotten into as far as what it's going to cost you to produce prints and what that ink costs, whether it's Epson or Canon. It doesn't really matter. They're all expensive. So think really hard about that even before you buy that printer. Watch a lot of videos, not just mine. There's lots of videos out there on the internet covering this very subject. I think I'm the only one that tells you like it is, though. So I hope you guys appreciate that. All right, I think that's plenty about this subject, don't you think? Yeah, we better stop. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and like. And please, happy printing, everybody. Even if you choose to do this, it actually works. All right, bye-bye.